Okay, thank you very much, Professor Tanabe. I'm very happy to see all of you here, and very good afternoon. So today I'm going to give kind of a short overview, a very brief overview of Russian culture and science. And when you look at the first slide of my presentation, you see here three different addresses in different countries: China, Estonia, and Poland. And I put them, as I always kind of make jokes, in the alphabetical order: C, E, P, and yet no address from Russia. So then you may ask, why am I going to talk about Russian culture and science? Well, as you have heard, I was born in Russia, and I will also give kind of maybe a short, brief self-introduction. So you have heard I got my degrees long time back. I was much younger at the time in Russia and also in Poland. And now I have these positions, as you have heard, in Estonia, Poland, and China. And yet, since I'm a Russian, I still feel kind of no connection with Russia. Also, I spent almost nearly 19 years out of the country. So I would like to speak about Russian culture. Yeah. But before I start my lecture, let me also show you some places which I have seen so far, which I enjoyed to visit thanks to science and physics. So this is my home city somewhere here, close to Black Sea, city of Krasnodar, south of Russia. And I left it in October 2000, 17 years back, and I moved then to this small country in Africa, Eritrea, former colony of Italy, which is squeezed in between Red Sea, Ethiopia, and Sudan. At that time, Sudan was not split yet into two countries. I spent there 1 year. After this, I moved to Israel, a very nice place, Rehovot, Weizmann Institute of Science, a very well-known place. And after this, somehow the story changed, and I somehow moved to Far East, and I stayed in Japan for more than 4 beautiful years in Kyoto. And Professor Isao Tanaka-sensei was my boss at that time. And I enjoyed life in Kyoto very much. Then I moved to Estonia, a small country in the north of Europe, in between Baltic Sea, Finland, and Russia here. And then, as you have heard now, I have these positions also in Poland and in China. And now, somehow, story comes back, and I'm now in Kyoto for 4 beautiful months. Well, maybe a few more slides about Estonia. So this country of a map of Europe, okay, a green color shows the EU countries, and the map is now somewhat out of date. Britain is still shown as a EU member. Well, perhaps I would have to change the map now. So this dark green country is Estonia. As I said, Baltic Sea here, Finland over there, and here Russia. The most fastest route to travel from Estonia to Japan is you fly to Helsinki, a flight just about 25 minutes. Then you take a flight from Helsinki to Kansai airport, about 9 hours. Well, so then this is the map of Estonia. A small country, really a very small country, as you see. Population is about 1.3 million, less than in the whole city of Kyoto. Area is also not very big. You can cross the whole country from north to south in about 3 hours by car. So, and Tartu, the city is somewhere here in this part of Estonia. So here we have a capital, Tallinn. And the next slide shows a few images from Tartu. So this is the main building of Tartu University. I have to go back. Yes, it is pretty old one. It was founded in 1632 by Swedish king. So this is the main building in winter time, when we have a lot of bright LEDs to light it up before Christmas. And in summertime, we also do have sometimes blue sky and warm weather. Yeah. So then also a few images of Tartu city here. So this is main square and city hall here, main river which goes through the city. Some churches over there in winter time. Well, winter time here, it can be pretty cold, like minus 25 degrees Celsius, sometimes minus 30, so quite harsh winter. Yeah, and Tartu is a small town, population is about 100,000 only. But it is famous for its old university, which I work in. Yeah. Well, So before we start now actual lecture, I would like to give a quote, which is quite funny quote and quite famous in Russia. Nobody can embrace the unembraceable. And the person who is the author of this quote is Kuzma Prudkov, but it is a fictitious person. It was not a real person, it is kind of a pseudonym. And famous Russian writer from 19th century, Alexei Tolstoy, not Leo Tolstoy, but Alexei is a different Tolstoy. And his three cousins just wished to have fun. They just somehow tried to write many kind of jokes, poems, under this kind of pseudonym. So nobody can embrace the unembraceable. Yeah? And why do I give here such a quote? Well, if we are going to speak about science and culture of Russia, and as of science and culture of any other country, it would mean really a very long lecture, maybe even a long lecture course, several years of tough and hard studies like to get bachelor degree, master, PhD, and even then many things would just remain untouched, definitely. So we have here only about 1 hour. And what I can give here, even if I would do my best, what I am going to do, I can just give a very short introduction to some maybe aspects of life in Russia. And again, I have to tell you in advance, of course, this simply cannot be complete. I simply cannot give a full overview of everything. So let's now start something about Russian culture and Russian science. So, okay, let's go to the map of the world. Okay, what we can notice, Russia is the largest country in the world. Okay, yeah. If you now look deeper, okay, the area is about 17 million square kilometers. It spans across 11 time zones, so the time difference, from here to here is 11 hours, so quite wide country. Population is about 144 million. And in the recent year, Russia enjoys kind of positive growth rate, plus 0.2%. Before it was negative, which maybe is not very good, definitely. So as for the size, from southwest to northeast, about 9,000 kilometers. So quite wide country, quite big. Yet, since it has not very big population, I think just somewhat greater than Japanese population. The density is very weak, about very small, about 9 persons per square kilometer. So plenty of space, especially here in Siberia. Yeah? Okay, if you now speak about population of Russia, capital is Moscow. Capital is Moscow, the biggest city in Russia. More than 12 million of people live here. The second city is St. Petersburg, about 5.3 million, just about 1 hour by flight if you fly from Moscow to northwest. Yeah, and what else? Okay, here I show the state symbols of Russia. We, all know this. Yeah, the flag of Russian Federation with these three strips, white, blue, and red, and coat of arms of Russian Federation. So these colors, blue, white, and red, they are popular for Slavic nations. And if you look at the flags of Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, Slovenia, Serbia, Croatia, they all have these three colors in different combinations. Well, if you look at coat of arms of Russian Federation, you see here this double-headed eagle, then this Saint George, who is going on white horse, who is killing a snake. And from here, from these symbols, we can easily trace influence of Byzantine Empire. Because in fact, the Christianity came to Russia in about, I think, like 10th century, and it came from Byzantine. So then a lot of things also came with Christianity, like Cyrillic alphabet, like shape of churches, everything. So traces of Byzantine influence can be seen even now in Russian culture. Well, if we speak about, again, Russia in general, languages, well, people somehow are used to think, okay, Russian people speak Russian language. That's true, to some extent. But Russia is a multinational state, and there are more than 160 ethnic groups and more than 100 languages spoken. Not dialects, but languages. And some of them can be quite far, from each other, so it's maybe hard to understand. Yet, of course, people use Russian as kind of a common joint language. Yes, and people who speak Russian, they also can somehow understand other Slavic languages like Polish or Czech or Slovak. Maybe not everything, but still possible to understand. What else? Something interesting, 25% of scientific literature in the world is published in Russian. So not a few, I would say. And if you speak now about scientific information, also all printed information, up to 60% altogether, sorry, I have to get used to this pointer, is printed either in Russian or in English. So if you know Russian, if you can read Russian, you can read a lot. Yeah. Well, what else? If now we just look at the country from the point of view of geography and nature, well, landscapes of the country. Since the country is huge in size, this big size, it just implies that we can see, we can enjoy a vast variety of landscapes, different, forests, mountains, whatever else. And here also I show a few photographs here. So it is kind of a typical view of what people call Middle Russia. About a few hundred kilometers south of Moscow, you have this kind of hills and slowly flowing rivers like here. Of course, you have forests, birch forests, which are nicely yellow in the autumn, which are lively green in summer. Well, but also we have in Russia, okay, of course, winter. Somehow there is kind of stereotype, okay, Russia, Siberia, cold winter, lots of snow. That's true to some extent. So winter in Siberia, and okay, the temperature can drop down to minus 50, minus 60 degrees Celsius, pretty harsh conditions, yeah. But also we have mountains. So this is Caucasus Mountains, Black Sea and Caspian Sea in between, and they are pretty high, up to, let's say, up to 5,600 meters. So then the snow is always over there on the top. You can enjoy skiing even in July over there, yeah? But also we have plenty of things. Okay, typical birch forest. It is really, if you enter such a forest, you feel that you are somehow at the center of light. Because of this white skin of birch trees, you really have a lot of light over there, yeah? So kind of something very, very special. But also we have, okay, Siberia. It is something which you can, a similar landscape you can see if you just fly from Kansai to Helsinki, because you fly over Siberia and you see that there is vast plain areas, no people, no cities, nothing, just rivers and forests. Well, okay, and also a few photos which I found here quite recently. Okay, it is not far from Japan, Kamchatka Peninsula. These nice mountains, maybe some of them may look a little bit similar to Fuji mountain. Of course, not too much, but a little bit similar. Okay, also not a well-known place perhaps for foreigners, Altai Mountains. It is between Kazakhstan and China. And the climate there is similar to climate in Switzerland, a little bit, yeah. So also mountains which are quite high and a lot of forests. And also we do have some kind of sand dunes, also not far from here, close to Baikal, Lake Baikal. It looks like a real, African or Arabic desert. So quite many things we can see. And since, again, the country is quite big, there are 4 very well-pronounced seasons. So springtime, summertime, autumn, and again this white winter with a lot of snow can be enjoyed in many places in Russia. Well, let's now speak a little bit about Russian architecture. What is a typical concept of architecture in Russia? Perhaps we have to start with churches. Because again, as I said to you, influence of Byzantine is strong in Russia. So some of those first churches, they date back to 10th or 11th century, pretty old. And here I show a few typical churches. So this is one of cathedrals in Moscow Kremlin. And this is a very famous church, so-called Pokrova na Nerli. It is written here. It is a church from 11th century. So they all have kind of common features, this onion-shaped cupola. It is typical shape of Russian churches, and you also can notice some difference in the cross at the top. Catholic churches, they have just kind of simple cross. In Orthodox churches, there is also some kind of this extra things on the cross. Yeah, also kind of difference. You can easily spot Catholic church or Orthodox church. Well, some more churches also shown here. Some kind of masterpiece in Karelia, about maybe 1 hour by flight from St. Petersburg, so-called Kizhi place. This is made out of wood, everything out of wood, and no single nail was used. And also pretty old, at least I think maybe kind of 5 or maybe even more 100 years back it was made, and also the place which attracts a lot of tourists. Okay, perhaps one of the most kind of, again, picturesque churches in Russia is in Moscow, so-called Pokrovsky Church. It is just exactly on Red Square, center of Moscow. It was built in 16th century. So still it is in this very good, very colorful shape. And now I think there is a museum inside of this church. It is not active church anymore. Well, of course, some kind of, again, these very famous pictures of Moscow Kremlin here, which was built with the help of Italian architects in, I think, in 13th or 14th century. So these towers of Kremlin with these red stars here, and also all churches inside the Kremlin here, shown in the picture. And this is Moscow River, which flows just around the Kremlin. Okay, so it is a night view of Moscow History Museum, also close to the Red Square. I think it is just opposite of the Pokrovsky Church. Red Square, and it is this museum now does contain a lot of really interesting things, artifacts from history of Russia. Okay, one more masterpiece of Russian architecture, Peterhof, close to St. Petersburg. Peter the Great, famous emperor who ruled Russia at the end of 17th, beginning of 18th century. He moved the capital from Moscow to St. Petersburg. So a new city was just built up amidst nothing, just swamps and forests. And this place, Peterhof, is called sometimes Russian Versailles. There's no splendor of fountains, gold, and everything. Looks very impressive. So here also, what I show another view of this fountain. So this channel goes all the way to the Baltic Sea, which is just over here. Well, one more church is also in St. Petersburg and Peterhof. As you see in this shape, somehow we can trace maybe also influence of style from Italy, because also a lot of architects from Italy came. Of course, it is Orthodox Church. You see this shape of the cross, and again, this kind of onion-shaped dome. But all this kind of splendor, this decoration, it just maybe look familiar to many churches in Italy. Well, modern days Russia now is kind of undergoing fast development and different things. So I show here the images of modern cities. So this is Moscow, so-called Moscow city. These skyscrapers and kind of quite modern look. This is city of Grozny, recovered after all these sad events took place some time back. Okay, Kazan and Yekaterinburg, so quite modern cities which look kind of pretty modern. Yeah. Okay, some words about Russian costumes. So these are the images of typical Russian national costumes in Middle Russia. So you see a lot of red color. This is also not kind of on chance or by chance, because in old Russian language, the word for red, it is krasny, which means red. It also had different meaning. Also, it meant also beautiful. So this kind of red color also meant kind of beautiful, special clothes to be worn on very special occasions, like holidays, like festivals, and that's why a lot of Russian costumes they have a lot of red color. Okay, let's now go to Russian food a little bit, because again, a lot of things about the country can be said or can be understood if you look on what and how people eat. So, since Russia is kind of cold country, and yes, it is indeed, winter is very long, so the food then should give to people enough energy and enough, kind of warmth to survive through cold winter. And in old times, fresh vegetables, fresh fruits were, I would say, not often used. Of course, now you can buy everything in the supermarket, but in old times, no, forget about that. So the top 5 components of really, say, authentic Russian cuisine are as follows. Okay, potato, okay, in different forms, baked, fried, okay, soups, whatever else. Then bread. It is also a very important part of Russian cuisine. So in Japan, people eat rice. In Russia, people eat bread. Yeah. Then eggs, meat, of course, because again, you can get energy from meat, pork, or beef, or whatever else in different forms. And also butter, because again, also butter can give a lot of energy. Of course, then, what is also popular? Cabbage, milk, mushrooms, okay, cucumbers, tomatoes, everything, yeah. But this is, I would say, something most important for the Russian cuisine. Also, a few images of typical Russian dishes, okay. What is known sometimes as, okay, Russian, okay, borscht or soup, or, yeah. It is just kind of a soup with potatoes. Red color comes from tomatoes. You also can add here beef or pork or whatever, yes, and it's quite enjoyable, especially if it is hot. Yeah, in cold winter, it's really enjoyable. Okay, another kind of iconic Russian dish is what is called in Russian blini or pancakes. Pancakes which can be served again with different fillings, with jam, with honey, with meat, with cheese, with everything, with tea, with coffee. It is also something quite tasty, although, of course, a lot of calories are there, yeah? Yeah, what else? Okay, piroshki, or pirosiki, as people call in Japan, kind of these small little pastries which also can be filled with everything. Okay, sweet stuff, salty stuff, potatoes, jam, fruits, whatever else, and yeah. Well, also kind of, again, iconic food in Russia, caviar, or what is called in Russian ikra. Really something which people, kind of have or should try if they come to Russia, although it is now extremely expensive. Especially if it comes to this black caviar, it is really, I would say, extremely expensive, but yeah. Well, also kind of something kind of similar to kebab in Arabic countries, which is called shashlik. It is kind of combination of fried on open fire meat with different kind of maybe vegetables. So as you see, style of food is quite different. Yeah. Why? Because again, a huge country. Many people, many ethnic groups, many possible or available products. So the food is also quite diverse. Well, what about Russian souvenirs? Okay, again, typical iconic thing is matryoshka, or this kind of wooden dolls, which are empty inside, so you can open and you find another doll inside it. You open it again and one more, and so on and so forth. Then it can be up to maybe 10 or even more dolls. So you start with this big one and you end up with a very, very small one, like something you even already cannot cut it into 2 pieces. Yeah, then also wooden kitchenware, it is called hokhloma, after the place where it is produced. It is made out of wood, and this typical kind of black and red color, and kind of also this yellow color, it is typical for this type of souvenirs also. What else? Also now we go maybe to some more old stuff. Okay, this huge, sometimes really very big kind of teapots called samovar in Russian. Now maybe they are not so popular, of course, because it is maybe we have this this modern stuff, but people really used it such stuff a lot in these old days. Also, this painted trays for to serve dishes, and some pretty expensive stuff here, so-called Fabergé eggs. This is the name of a goldsmith family in Russia. And they were producing these so-called Fabergé eggs, a lot of gold, a lot of precious stones. So all this stuff is really extremely precious. So maybe it's not easy to get it to your home private collection. Well, let's now turn to Russian literature, something also which is very well known in the world. And again, if you go back to history, we start at about 12th century with this kind of historical chronicle, which is known in the West under the name The Tale of Igor's Campaign. And I would say it is really a very bad translation of original Russian title, because it has only one word in common, Igor, name of this king. Kind of quite different emphasis. So it is kind of a story of king, knyaz in Russian at the time, King Igor, who wanted to defeat pagan tribes south of Russia. He was not successful with that, so he was taken as a prisoner of war, but the story is kind of long, and you see here I show the kind of maybe one of very old books about this story with these old Russian Cyrillic letters. Some of them now are no longer used. Some of them look like this. Omega comes from Greek, like O sound here. So it is just the book from which Russian literature evolves. And then, interestingly, until 19th century, it's really very hard to find very prominent names of Russian writers. But then in 19th century, somehow it was the time which is now called a golden time of Russian literature. Many names emerged, and really, I show here only a few of them. Okay, the most famous Russian poet, Alexander Pushkin, and his masterpiece is Evgeny Onegin, this poem, which is called a novel in poetic style. As you see, he died when he was quite young, so 37 years old. He was killed in a duel. Well, it happened at that time, at that age. Okay, another very famous and very bright figure is Leo Tolstoy, a famous writer. And the most famous books produced by him is this War and Peace, about Napoleon invasion into Russia, and Anna Karenina. And also many, many others. And these two may be the most famous, and many movies were made, and Hollywood also made several movies. I think even maybe late 40s or early 50s of previous century, they made movies on these novels. He also was nominated a few times for literature, a Nobel Prize in literature, but he did not get it. Well, also one more very famous writer, also very popular in the West, Fyodor Dostoevsky. His most famous things are Crime and Punishment and The Brothers Karamazov. So another very famous story is, The Player. This is the name, because, well, why he wrote maybe that story? He also was used to play in casinos. So he spends a lot of money, and somehow maybe in an attempt to overcome this kind of passion, he wrote this book, The Player, about a person also who played a lot. So it is just a very few names from 19th century. Let's now go further, 20th century. It was a time of many turmoils in Russia. Two revolutions, 1905, 1917, change of regime, collapse of Russian Empire. Many people left Russia, they went to the West. And one of very famous writers is Vladimir Nabokov. He left Russia when he was just at the age of about 20. He left Russia with his family, his parents. and his father was a member of Russian parliament at that time. So he was from a say very rich family. It's also interesting how he said how he understood himself. So here a quote from his actually some kind of diaries. He said about himself, "I'm an American writer who was born in Russia, received education in England, degree in French literature, before his move to Germany for 15 years. My head speaks English, my heart speaks Russian, my ear French." So he was really a kind of cosmopolitan person. And what is also funny, he learned how to read in English before he learned how to read in Russian. Yeah, he liked chess very much. He also has another passion, entomology. And he had a very big collection of different butterflies, more than 4,000 species. After his death, his widow, his wife, did donate this collection to the Lausanne University in Switzerland. And he also was a scientist. He published 25 articles on entomology, and one type of butterfly which he found is named after him. Well, I like the way how he writes, and he also was 4 times nominated for Nobel Prize, but he never got it. Well, time goes by, and now I show another names who got Nobel Prize in literature. So the first Russian who got a Nobel Prize in literature was Ivan Bunin. He also left Russia after October Revolution, and he got the prize in 1933. He lived in France, in Paris, and he died in Paris in emigration. Okay, one of my favorite writers here is Mikhail Bulgakov, also a very famous guy. His masterpiece is Master and Margarita. It is kind of enormously beautiful, I would say, novel with a very twisted plot, written in a very nice language, so kind of something which I like and I enjoy very much. Okay, another very bright name, Nobel Prize winner in literature, Joseph Brodsky, a poet. His poems, sure, it is very hard to translate poem into a different language. It's very hard to express everything. But some of his best poems in Russian, they are so elegantly beautiful. He's kind of a genius. How he really can build and break the sentence. It is kind of something which not everybody can do. So this is something about Russian literature. Still, of course, we have a lot of things to speak about. Russian music. Again, somehow until 19th century, maybe not much can be said about Russian music. Already in Europe, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven lived and passed away. In Russia, so far, almost nobody. Then, again, 19th century, and these names like Tchaikovsky come up, and he is the author of many famous ballets like Swan Lake, Nutcracker. Sergei Rachmaninov, who also left Russia after October Revolution, and he became an American citizen before his death, actually. What is also kind of maybe shows his links with Russia. In World War II, he was in the USA, but he organized a series of concerts, and then he just sent all the money to embassy of USSR in the USA to be used for military budget to produce maybe weapons, somehow to help his country to overcome the war. Well, also a very famous name, Dmitry Shostakovich. He has never left Russia. He spent all his time in Russia, but he's mostly famous for his symphonies which he wrote in the city of Leningrad. In World War II, the city was blocked by German troops for nearly 3 years with a very limited supply of food and everything. The life was very tough, and his music was played at that time, and somehow it also may help to keep spirit high for people over there. Of course, yes, Mussorgsky also, yes, Glinka also. So many names I simply cannot mention all of them here. Okay, let's now turn to sport a little bit. Okay, Russia is a winter country. Okay, ice hockey, yeah. We are not as good in football as, for example, our Italians, yeah. Yeah, but ice hockey, yes, we are doing pretty well. So here are some images and some statistics. So 27 times the team of Russia or USSR became world champions, and 8 times they did win Olympic gold medals. And of course, many occasions to get second place after Canada or after Czech Republic, yeah. So kind of this very tough competition, yeah. Okay, figure skating is also very popular in Russia, also in Japan very popular. So here I also just give a few numbers, okay, kind of statistics. Olympic Games, 27 golds, 19 silvers, 9 bronze. And World Championships, I mean, in all years, 80 gold medals. And I also was very pleased to find a link with Japan when we speak about figure skating. This pair, Yuko Kawaguchi and Alexander Smirnov, they became world champions. So this is a Japanese girl who did skate with Alexander Smirnov. So here are the images. She even became a Russian citizen to be able to compete for Russia in Olympic Games. So you see, we do have some kind of sport connections as well. Okay, speaking about sport, chess, of course, should be somehow said. Also, a story is like one English journal wrote kind of a joke, maybe, why Russians are so good at chess. Because the winters are so long. What to do? Just sit, inside, drink vodka and play chess. Okay, so here I show the photographs of world champions in chess. They are all from Russia or from Soviet Union. So the first one is Alexander Alekhin. He also left Russia after October Revolution. So you see, these people, they just kept this world crown for 73 years, from 1927 till 2000. Only 5 years were kind of missed. 2 years here when Alekhin lost the match to Ewe from Netherlands, and here when Boris Spassky lost the match to Fischer from the USA. So all the rest is kind of domination of Russian chess players. Well, maybe because of winter, yeah. I don't know. Okay, let's now turn to science. Okay, again, it's always kind of maybe nice or instructive to look at the origin of things. So where does Russian science come from? And of course, no doubt, we go back to the name of Mikhail Lomonosov, who is just given a credit to be a really first Russian scientist. He was born in a, I would say, not very rich family up north, close to the so-called White Sea. But since his young age, he somehow showed an interest to study, to learn new things. And he was sent to Moscow. At that time, of course, Moscow was not the center of science, but still somehow he also was able to make it to be sent to Germany. So then he learned a lot there, and he did a lot of things, in chemistry, in physics, mineralogy. He was the first to discover that Venus has an atmosphere. Yeah, he did this with telescope when Venus passed before the sun disk. So then you see how the shape is a little bit changed. So then he somehow gave an idea, okay, perhaps the Venus has an atmosphere. He was right. So he also wrote a lot of poetries, and actually he was maybe the first one who did create the basis of modern Russian literature language. And he also was a founder of the Moscow State University, which is now has a name, Lomonosov Moscow State University. So this is the main building of that Moscow State University. Okay, let me now switch to physics, because somehow this area is closer to me. Yeah, so again, maybe not too much can be said about Russian physics until 19th century. But then two very bright figures come out. Professor Stoletov from Moscow, he was known for this experimental research of photo effect. So in some ways, Einstein equation for photo effect perhaps was possible because of experimental jobs also done by Stoletov as well. And one more famous professor, Pyotr Lebedev, who was the first to discover and to measure the light pressure. So again, to some extent, this discovery was also one of those discoveries who, in fact, led people to quantum mechanics development, finally.
How much did he understand photoelectric effect before Einstein?
I'm not sure right now. Of course, no idea about quantum of light, definitely. Perhaps just kind of empirical. Exactly, experimental data, yes, yeah. So not theoretical, but very thorough. At that time, measurements of this current and voltage, this effects, yeah. Okay, let's now go to 20th century, and quite a number of Nobel Prizes also were won by Russian physicists. So year 1958 comes first, and these three professors, Cherenkov, Frank, and Tam, they got this prize for discovery and explanation of the Cherenkov effect. So this was the first Nobel Prize in physics which was obtained, which was received by Soviet at the time scientists. Okay, then somehow a few years after, one more prize also went to USSR, very famous Lev Landau. He got the prize for his works on liquid helium and phenomena which are related with low temperature. Most unfortunately, 1 year before he got a Nobel Prize, he suffered a lot in a car accident. He really got very serious injuries. He was saved, but he could not recover completely to be as active as he was before. So it was kind of a very pity and very sad accident which took place. Okay, 2 years after, again, it was kind of a very good decade for Soviet physics. Two physicists, Professor Basov and Professor Prokhorov, they shared the Nobel Prize with American physicist Towns for invention of lasers. So also it was funny for me to know that Prokhorov was born in Australia. Then somehow his family moved to Russia. So it's kind of interesting thing, yeah. Well, 1978, one more prize also went to Russia. Pyotr Kapitsa. He got the prize for discoveries in the area of low temperature physics. What is also interesting, he got the prize in 1978 for his works which he did in late 20s, early 30s. So he got the prize kind of 50 years after he did the job. And also a funny story about him. In 1921, he went to Cambridge to the lab led by Professor Rutherford. And he asked him if it is possible or not to be hired, to get a job in your lab. Rutherford said to him, okay, no, I have 30 lab members at the moment, so I cannot offer you any position. Then Kapitsa was kind of very inventive to find a good answer. He asked Professor, what is the accuracy of your measurements? Professor did not feel anything, did not feel any kind of trap, and he said, okay, about 3% is okay. So then Kapitsa said to him, okay, 1% out of 30 is about 3%. So just if you take me to your lab, it is like accuracy of your measurements. Plus minus 1% is not a big deal. So Rutherford somehow did appreciate this joke, and he said, okay, yes, you are hired now. I mean, I give you a job. And then for more than 10 years, I think something like 15 years, they worked together, and they published a lot of joint papers, and finally Kapitsa got a Nobel Prize for his research on low temperature physics. Well, then 22 years were somehow missed. Then Fyodor Salfyorov in the year of 2000 got his prize for his research on semiconductors. And also what is interesting, one more link with Japan. In the next year, he got a Kyoto Prize in Advanced Technology. Okay? Well, year of 2003, two academicians, most unfortunately they are passed away now, got their prize again for their works on superconductivity and superfluids. The works they did, I think, in late 50s They were quite young at that time. Abrikosov was about 30 years something. Ginsburg was about 40 years something. So they published those papers in which they could develop very important aspects of theory of superconductivity. And then 50 years after that, they got their prize. Okay, and the most recent example, 2010, Andrei Geim and Novoselov, they got their prize for discovery of graphene structure. So I think Novoselov is one perhaps maybe of youngest Nobel Prize winners. Not the most youngest, but one of those who got the prize. He was about 36, I think, yeah. So not very old, yeah. So this is about Russian physics and science. Of course, again, I cannot give here a full overview of physics, and of course, I simply cannot touch here any other things, any other topics in science. Yeah. But now we switch to one more important topic: space research and space missions. It is well known that the first man to make a space journey was a Russian pilot, Yuri Gagarin. He did this in the year of 1961. He was just 27 years old. So then this is a famous series of so-called Soyuz, or Union in English, Union spacecrafts, which were very popular, I think in the 70s and in the 80s. Each and every space mission from USSR was launched in these Soyuz spacecrafts. I also was surprised to find one more connection with Japan. The first Japanese to make a space journey was Toshihiro Akiyama. And he also did this with, at that time, Soviet space mission in the year of 1990. Yeah, and he was, that flight and, I mean, his mission was organized and just was held in this so-called Mir space station. It is now no longer in use. I think it was in the orbit for about kind of 30 years. And then it was just kind of, get rid of, and somehow it was just somehow drowned in Pacific. And it was replaced by a more advanced, more maybe bigger, much bigger space station, which is now shown, I think, in the next picture here. It is so-called International Space Station, which is now jointly used by a space agency from Russia, so-called Roscosmos, which means, Russian Cosmos, also NASA, also European Space Agency, Japan Aerospace Agency. So joint expeditions launched to this station. And just to give an idea about the size of that station, about 180 meters. So kind of a huge object just flies around the Earth. And the total weight is about 350 tons, so quite heavy and quite big. And a lot of experiments are being made now. And I think nowadays almost this station is never empty. I think just one expedition goes out, another comes in, and it kind of almost continuous use non-stop on this very long basis. Well, I think maybe my time is kind of close to almost over. So before we stop this kind of very short introduction to the Russian culture, what I would like again to remind you, we did start with this expression: nobody can embrace the unembraceable. And definitely we also could not be successful in doing this. And we have seen just a very few things which can be related to Russia and culture and science. And many things were left without any, kind of discussion. For example, I said nothing about famous Russian ballet, which is very popular. I did not mention anything about painting. By the way, I think I saw some advertisement in Hyogo Museum of Art, Hyogo Prefecture. There is now exhibition of paintings from a Russian museum, Hermitage Museum from St. Petersburg. So still there are this kind of exchange, between Russia and Japan, these painting exhibitions and so on. I said nothing about theater, which is also quite famous, and theater in Russia also has very long traditions, and is also kind of the names of Stanislavski, for example. They are well known in the theater world. I said nothing about about mathematics. I said nothing about history. I said nothing about geology. I said nothing about the relations of Russia with other countries. I simply did not have time. So just I hope you did learn maybe something new from this short overview I have given here. And of course, I would like to thank you for your attention. And also, I will try to do this also in Russian and in Japanese. Thank you.
Thank you very much.